In the shadowed corners of human history, where myths and truths intertwine like the roots of ancient trees, there exists a tale whispered only in the darkest hours. It is a story of the abyss, a realm so profound and enigmatic that its very name evokes both awe and terror. The abyss is not merely a place, it is a living entity, a vast expanse of darkness that stretches beyond the comprehension of mortal minds. Its depths are said to be infinite, a labyrinth of shifting landscapes and perpetual night, where time itself seems to falter and dissolve. At the heart of this unfathomable domain reigns the Queen of the Abyss, a figure shrouded in mystery and power. She is neither wholly human nor entirely otherworldly, but something far more complex, a being born from the primordial chaos that predates existence itself. Her origins are veiled in legend, with tales speaking of her emergence from the first void, a sentient force that coalesced from the raw essence of despair and creation. Some say she was once a guardian, tasked with maintaining balance between light and shadow, while others believe she is the embodiment of humanity's deepest fears, given form and dominion over the unseen realms. The Queen commands an empire of shadows, her influence extending far beyond the physical boundaries of the abyss. Her court is populated by entities as ancient and incomprehensible as she, creatures forged from the same dark matter that birthed the stars. They serve her not out of loyalty, but out of necessity, for her will is absolute, her presence an unyielding force that bends reality to her desires. Her throne, carved from obsidian and encrusted with crystals that pulse with an eerie luminescence, stands at the nexus of countless dimensions, a seat of power that resonates with the hum of untold energies. Yet, for all her majesty and might, the Queen remains an enigma. Her visage is rarely seen, obscured by veils of swirling mist and the flickering glow of ethereal flames. When she does reveal herself, it is said that her eyes hold galaxies within them, each one a testament to the countless lives and worlds she has touched or consumed. Her voice, when it echoes through the cavernous halls of her palace, carries the weight of eternity, a sound that can inspire both reverence and dread in equal measure. To those who dwell on the surface, the Queen of the Abyss is a distant myth, a cautionary tale told to children to keep them from wandering too far into the unknown. But to those who have glimpsed the edges of her realm, who have felt the pull of her inscrutable gaze, she is a reality as undeniable as the ground beneath their feet. And though her motives remain obscured, one truth is certain. The Queen of the Abyss is a ruler unlike any other, a sovereign whose dominion transcends the boundaries of life and death, light and shadow, hope and despair. Long before the fateful encounter between the Queen of the Abyss and the human soldier, the world above had already begun to unravel. For centuries, humanity had thrived in ignorance of the hidden forces that governed the unseen realms beneath their feet. But as civilizations expanded and their hunger for knowledge grew insatiable, they began to pierce the veil that separated their world from the abyss. At first, it was subtle, an inexplicable chill in the air, whispers carried on the wind, or dreams that lingered long after waking. These signs were dismissed as superstition, the remnants of old folklore meant to frighten rather than warn. Yet, as the years passed, the disturbances grew more pronounced. Crops failed without reason, rivers turned black as ink, and entire villages vanished overnight, leaving behind only silence and the faint scent of brimstone. It was during this time of mounting unease that the soldier's journey began. His name was Elias, though few remembered it anymore. He had been born into a family of farmers, his childhood spent tending fields under the watchful gaze of a sun that seemed eternal. But the world changed swiftly, and so did he. By the age of 20, Elias had traded plows for swords, joining the ranks of a militia formed to combat the growing chaos. At first, their battles were against tangible foes, raiders, beasts driven mad by some unseen force, and rival factions vying for dwindling resources. But as the years dragged on, the enemy became less clear, less human. Shadows moved where no light should fall, voices spoke in languages no living tongue could decipher, and wounds inflicted by unseen hands refused to heal. The soldiers fought bravely, but bravery alone could not stem the tide of an adversary that defied logic. Elias distinguished himself early on, not through brute strength but through an uncanny ability to sense danger before it struck. Where others saw confusion, he found patterns. Where others faltered, he pressed forward. His superiors noticed this, and soon he was tasked with leading reconnaissance missions into areas deemed too perilous for larger groups. It was during one such mission that Elias encountered the artifact, a shard of obsidian, jagged and cold, embedded in the earth like a splinter of the abyss itself. When he touched it, visions flooded his mind. Endless corridors of darkness, towering spires of bone and stone, and at the center of it all, a figure cloaked in shadow, watching him with eyes that burned like dying stars. The vision lasted only moments, but its impact lingered, searing itself into his soul. Word of the artifact reached the highest echelons of power, and Elias was summoned to deliver it personally. The leaders of his faction, desperate for answers, believed the shard held the key to understanding the source of the chaos. Reluctantly, Elias handed over the artifact, though he felt a pang of unease as it left his grasp. Days later, the capital city erupted in chaos. The skies darkened unnaturally, and from the depths of the earth came a sound, a low, resonant hum that vibrated through every living thing. The artifact had acted as a beacon, drawing the attention of the abyss. What followed was a massacre unlike anything Elias had ever witnessed. The streets ran red, not with blood, but with something darker, thicker, as if the very essence of life was being drained away. Survivors spoke of shadowy figures emerging from cracks in the ground, their forms shifting and indistinct, their purpose singular: destruction. Elias barely escaped with his life, but the experience left him changed. The guilt of having unwittingly unleashed such devastation weighed heavily on him, as did the knowledge that the artifact, and the abyss, was far from done. In the weeks that followed, reports surfaced of similar artifacts appearing across the land, each one a fragment of the same malevolent force. The connection between these shards and the Queen of the Abyss became undeniable. Scholars whispered of an ancient pact, broken eons ago, that had kept the realms separate. Now, the barriers were crumbling, and the Queen's influence was spilling into the mortal world like poison into a stream. Determined to make amends, Elias dedicated himself to uncovering the truth. He scoured forgotten libraries, consulted mystics who spoke in riddles, and ventured into places most would never dare to tread. Along the way, he pieced together fragments of the Queen's history, learning of her rise to power and the intricate web of alliances and betrayals that had shaped her reign. He discovered that the artifacts were not mere tools but extensions of her will, each one a thread in a tapestry woven from the fabric of reality itself. And he learned of the prophecy, a foretelling that spoke of a mortal who would stand before the Queen, not as a conqueror, but as a harbinger of balance. As Elias delved deeper into the mysteries of the abyss, he began to feel its pull, a constant tug at the edges of his consciousness. It was as though the Queen herself was aware of his quest, watching him with a mixture of curiosity and disdain. Dreams plagued him, vivid and haunting, in which he stood before her throne, dwarfed by her immense presence. In these visions, she spoke not with words but with emotions, waves of sorrow, rage, and longing that crashed over him like storms. Each dream left him weaker, yet more resolute. He knew now that his path would lead him to her, whether he sought it or not. The closer Elias came to unraveling the secrets of the abyss, the more the world around him unraveled as well. Entire regions fell into shadow, swallowed by the encroaching darkness. Those who remained clung to hope, though it grew thinner with each passing day. And through it all, Elias pressed on, driven by a singular purpose, to face the Queen of the Abyss and confront the truth of what she truly was. Whether he would emerge victorious or be consumed by the very forces he sought to understand remained uncertain. But one thing was clear: the moment of reckoning was inevitable. The journey to the abyss was not one of distance but of descent, a harrowing plunge into the depths of both the world and Elias's own psyche. The path began in the ruins of the capital, where the air still carried the acrid tang of decay and despair. From there, he followed the trail of the artifacts, each shard leading him further into the unknown. The terrain shifted with every step, as though the land itself conspired to test his resolve. Verdant forests gave way to barren wastelands, where the soil crumbled to ash beneath his boots. Rivers of molten rock carved jagged paths through valleys of obsidian, their heat searing the air and casting an infernal glow that illuminated nothing but the void ahead. The deeper he ventured, the more the familiar laws of nature unraveled. Gravity faltered, time stretched and contracted, and the horizon bent unnaturally, as if the world were folding in on itself. Elias traveled alone, though solitude was a fleeting illusion. The shadows that stalked him were not born of imagination but of the abyss itself. They whispered incessantly, their voices a cacophony of overlapping tongues that clawed at the edges of his sanity. Some taunted him, calling him a fool for daring to challenge the Queen. Others pleaded with him to turn back, promising salvation if he abandoned his quest. He ignored them, focusing instead on the steady rhythm of his breath and the weight of the blade at his side. Yet, even as he pressed forward, doubt gnawed at him. Was he truly seeking redemption, or was he chasing a destiny thrust upon him by forces beyond his control? The question haunted him, a specter that lingered just out of reach, refusing to be silenced. The artifacts served as both guideposts and trials, each one demanding a piece of him in exchange for passage. The first shard he encountered was embedded in the heart of a crumbling temple, its walls adorned with murals depicting scenes of creation and destruction. To claim it, he had to solve a riddle etched into the stone floor, the answer lying buried in the recesses of his memory. The second shard lay at the bottom of a chasm so deep that its end was lost in shadow. Descending required him to scale a fragile rope bridge that swayed precariously with every gust of wind, testing not only his strength but his courage. Each artifact brought him closer to the abyss, yet each also exacted a toll. By the time he reached the third shard, his body bore the marks of his journey, cuts and bruises that refused to heal, his skin pale and clammy as though the life was being leached from him. The emotional toll was even greater. Memories long buried resurfaced with cruel clarity, forcing him to confront the faces of those he had failed. The villagers who had perished in the capital, their screams echoing in his ears. The comrades who had fallen beside him, their blood staining his hands. Even the faces of his parents, who had sent him off to war with pride in their eyes, now seemed to accuse him of abandoning them. Guilt and grief became constant companions, their weight heavier than any sword or shield. Yet, amidst the torment, there were moments of clarity, glimpses of purpose that reminded him why he had chosen this path. He thought of the survivors, clinging to hope despite the encroaching darkness. He thought of the world above, teetering on the brink of annihilation. And he thought of the Queen, whose presence loomed ever larger in his mind, a figure both terrifying and strangely compelling. As he neared the threshold of the abyss, the landscape transformed into something utterly alien. The ground beneath his feet was no longer solid but a shifting expanse of liquid shadow, rippling with every step. Towering spires of black crystal jutted from the horizon, their surfaces reflecting not light but fragments of his own memories. The air was thick with the scent of ozone and something else, something primal and ancient, like the breath of a sleeping god. Here, the whispers grew louder, almost deafening, their words forming a single unbroken chant. She awaits. She sees. She knows. The realization struck him like a blow. He was no longer merely approaching the abyss. It was drawing him in, pulling him toward its heart with an inevitability that left no room for escape. And then, at last, he saw it, the gateway to the abyss. It was not a door or a portal but a tear in the fabric of reality itself, a swirling vortex of darkness and light that pulsed with an energy both beautiful and horrifying. Standing before it, Elias felt the full weight of what lay ahead. This was no ordinary battle, no skirmish to be won with steel and strategy. It was a confrontation with the unknown, a reckoning with a power that defied comprehension. His hand trembled as he reached for the final artifact, the one that would grant him entry. The shard pulsed in his grip, its cold surface humming with a resonance that matched the rhythm of his heartbeat. He hesitated, the enormity of the moment pressing down on him like a mountain. But hesitation was a luxury he could not afford. The world above was counting on him, whether they knew it or not. Taking a deep breath, Elias stepped into the vortex, the darkness swallowing him whole. As he crossed the threshold, the voices ceased, replaced by an oppressive silence that rang louder than any scream. He was no longer in the world he knew. He was in the abyss, standing on the precipice of the Queen's domain. The air shimmered with an otherworldly light, and in the distance, he could see the faint outline of a throne, surrounded by a court of shadowy figures. The Queen herself was nowhere to be seen, but her presence was undeniable, a force that permeated every inch of the realm. Elias took a step forward, then another, each movement deliberate and measured. The ground beneath him was smooth and cold, like polished glass, and with every step, he felt the weight of countless eyes upon him. The court watched silently, their forms shifting and writhing like smoke caught in a breeze. They were neither fully present nor entirely absent, their existence hovering somewhere between reality and illusion. Among them, he recognized shapes that defied description, beings with too many limbs, too few eyes, or no discernible features at all. Their silence was unnerving, a collective stillness that seemed to mock his insignificance. Yet, amidst the sea of incomprehensible forms, one figure stood apart. The Queen of the Abyss emerged slowly, her arrival heralded not by fanfare but by a subtle shift in the atmosphere. The air grew heavier, charged with an energy that made the hairs on Elias's neck stand on end. She materialized before him, her form both ethereal and commanding. Her presence was overwhelming, a paradox of beauty and terror that defied categorization. She was tall, her silhouette framed by flowing robes that seemed to be woven from the very fabric of the abyss. Her skin shimmered like liquid obsidian, catching the dim light and scattering it into 1,000 fractured reflections. Her eyes, however, were the most arresting feature, vast, luminous orbs that seemed to contain entire galaxies within their depths. They fixed on Elias with an intensity that froze him in place, rooting him to the spot as surely as if chains had bound him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence stretched taut, a fragile membrane that seemed to separate two vastly different worlds. Then the Queen moved, her steps graceful yet deliberate, each one resonating with a sound that was neither footfall nor echo but something in between. She stopped a few paces away, her gaze never wavering. When she finally spoke, her voice was unlike anything Elias had ever heard. It was not a single tone but a symphony of sounds, layered and resonant, as though multiple voices were speaking in perfect harmony. Her words carried weight, each syllable reverberating through the chamber like the tolling of a bell. "You have come far, mortal," she said, her tone neither welcoming nor hostile but tinged with a curiosity that bordered on amusement. "Few dare to tread where you now stand. Fewer still survive the journey." Elias struggled to find his voice, his throat dry and his mind racing. When he finally managed to speak, his words came out halting, each one a battle against the suffocating pressure of her presence. I didn't come here for survival," he stammered, clutching the artifact tightly in his hand. "I came for answers. For balance." The Queen tilted her head slightly, a gesture that conveyed both intrigue and skepticism. "Balance," she repeated, the word rolling off her tongue like a foreign concept. "A noble pursuit, perhaps. But tell me, little soldier, do you truly understand what you seek? Do you comprehend the cost of meddling with forces beyond your ken?" Her words struck a nerve, stirring memories of the devastation he had witnessed, the lives lost, the world shattered. He clenched his jaw, forcing himself to meet her gaze. "I've seen what happens when the abyss spills into our world. I've felt its pull, its hunger. If balance means stopping that, then yes, I understand." A flicker of something passed across her face. Was it amusement? Disdain? It was impossible to tell. "You speak of hunger," she said, her voice softening ever so slightly, "as though it is a flaw. Yet hunger is what drives creation, destruction, and rebirth. Without it, there would be nothing, no light, no shadow, no you." Elias shook his head, frustration bubbling to the surface. "That's not what I'm talking about. You've unleashed chaos, suffering. People are dying because of what you've done." The Queen's expression shifted, her features hardening like stone. "And what of the suffering your kind has wrought upon my realm? The artifacts you covet, the barriers you shattered, do you think these acts were without consequence? You mortals, so quick to blame, so blind to your own transgressions." Her words hit him like a hammer, forcing him to confront truths he had tried to ignore. He thought of the artifact he had delivered to the leaders of his faction, the one that had acted as a beacon for the abyss. Had he been complicit in this disaster? Was he truly any better than the forces he sought to oppose? Before he could respond, the Queen raised a hand, silencing him with a gesture. "Enough," she said, her voice cutting through the turmoil in his mind. "You stand before me now, a speck of dust daring to challenge the storm. What is it you want, Elias? Redemption? Vengeance? Or do you simply wish to die with the illusion of purpose?" Her use of his name sent a shiver down his spine, a reminder of how deeply she understood him. He swallowed hard, searching for the right words. "I want to fix what's been broken, to protect those who can't protect themselves." The Queen regarded him for a long moment, her galaxy-like eyes unreadable. Then, without warning, she laughed, a sound that was both melodic and chilling, like the chiming of bells in a graveyard. "Protect them!" she echoed, her tone laced with mockery. How quaint. Tell me, soldier, do you truly believe you possess the strength to defy fate? To stand against the tide of inevitability? Elias straightened, his resolve hardening despite the fear that coursed through him. Maybe I don't, he admitted, his voice steadier now. But I have to try. If not for them, then for myself. I can't just walk away. The Queen's laughter faded, replaced by an expression that was almost thoughtful. She stepped closer, her towering form looming over him like a storm cloud. Courage, she murmured, almost to herself. Or perhaps foolishness. Either way, you intrigue me, mortal. Very well. Let us see if your conviction can withstand the trials that lie ahead. With that, she extended a hand, her fingers long and elegant, their tips glowing faintly with an inner light. Take my hand, Elias. Let us begin. The invitation hung in the air, heavy with implication. Elias hesitated, his mind racing with questions and doubts. What trials awaited him? What price would he have to pay? Yet, as he looked into the Queen's eyes, he realized that turning back was no longer an option. Whatever lay ahead, he would face it, not for glory, not for redemption, but because it was the only path left to him. Slowly he reached out, his hand trembling as it approached hers. The moment their fingers touched, a surge of energy coursed through him, unlike anything he had ever experienced. It was neither painful nor pleasant, but a force that seemed to strip away layers of his being, exposing truths he had buried deep within. The world around him blurred and shifted, the court of shadows dissolving into a kaleidoscope of images and sensations. He saw flashes of his past, the faces of those he had loved and lost, the choices that had led him here, but also glimpses of futures yet unwritten, possibilities that danced just out of reach. Through it all, the Queen's presence remained constant, a guiding force amidst the chaos. Her voice echoed in his mind, not as words but as feelings, emotions so raw and powerful that they threatened to overwhelm him. He felt her sorrow, a deep and ancient ache that spanned eons. He felt her anger, a burning fury directed not at him but at the injustices of existence itself. And beneath it all, he felt her longing, a yearning for something she could not name, something she had perhaps lost long ago. As the vision subsided and the world snapped back into focus, Elias found himself kneeling on the ground, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The Queen stood before him, her expression unreadable but her eyes softer, as though she had seen something in him that intrigued her. "Rise, soldier," she commanded, her voice gentle yet firm. "Your trial begins now." And with those words, the true test began, a journey not of the body but of the soul, a confrontation with truths that would either break him or forge him anew. Elias rose to his feet, though the weight of what he had just experienced still clung to him like a second skin. The Queen's gaze bore into him, unyielding yet strangely compassionate, as if she were both judge and witness to the unraveling of his very essence. Around them, the abyss shifted once more, its formless landscape morphing into something new, a labyrinth of jagged obsidian walls that stretched endlessly in every direction. The air hummed with an electric tension, charged by the Queen's will. "This is your trial," she said, her voice resonating through the crystalline corridors. "Not of strength or cunning, but of truth. You seek balance, Elias, yet you do not understand its cost. To restore equilibrium between our realms, you must first confront the imbalance within yourself." Before he could respond, the ground beneath his feet cracked open, revealing a chasm filled with swirling shadows. A single path emerged from the darkness, narrow and precarious, leading deeper into the heart of the labyrinth. The Queen gestured for him to proceed, her expression unreadable. "Walk this path, mortal. Face what lies ahead, and perhaps you will find the answers you seek." With no other choice, Elias stepped onto the path. Each step felt heavier than the last, as though the weight of his own doubts and fears pressed down upon him. The labyrinth seemed alive, its walls pulsing faintly with light that mirrored the rhythm of his heartbeat. Whispers echoed around him, fragments of voices he recognized, his parents, his comrades, even his own voice from moments long past. They spoke of regret, failure, and loss, weaving a tapestry of guilt that threatened to ensnare him. The first trial came swiftly. As he rounded a corner, the corridor opened into a vast chamber where a figure stood waiting. It was himself, or at least a version of him. This Elias wore the armor of a soldier, battered and bloodied, his face etched with the weariness of countless battles. In his hand, he held a sword dripping with crimson liquid. "You failed them," the doppelganger said, his voice hollow and accusing. "Every life you couldn't save, every decision you made, it all led here. To this ruin." Elias recoiled, the words striking a chord deep within him. He wanted to argue, to deny the accusations, but the truth was undeniable. The faces of those he had lost flashed before his eyes. The villagers, his friends, the innocent lives consumed by the chaos he had unwittingly unleashed. His knees buckled under the weight of his guilt. But then, amidst the despair, a spark ignited within him. "I may have failed," he admitted, his voice trembling but resolute. "But I'm here now. I can't change the past, but I can fight for the future." The doppelganger hesitated, its form flickering like a dying flame. Then, with a final piercing glare, it dissolved into nothingness, leaving Elias alone once more. Though shaken, he pressed on, knowing that the trials were far from over. The next challenge awaited him in a cavernous hall filled with mirrors. Each reflection showed a different version of himself, some triumphant, others broken, each one representing a path he might have taken. One mirror depicted him as a farmer, content but oblivious to the suffering beyond his fields. Another showed him as a ruthless warlord, wielding power without mercy. Yet another revealed a man consumed by grief, unable to move forward after the loss of his loved ones. The queen's voice echoed softly in the chamber. "Which of these is the true Elias? Or are they all pieces of who you are?" Elias stared at the reflections, his mind reeling. He realized that none of these versions fully encapsulated him. They were fragments of his identity, shaped by choices and circumstances. But there was one constant across all the images: the desire to protect, to make amends, to strive for something greater than himself. "I am all of these," he whispered, his voice steady despite the turmoil within. "And none of them. I am who I choose to be." As he spoke, the mirrors shattered, their shards dissolving into the air like mist. The labyrinth shifted again, guiding him toward the final trial. When Elias entered the last chamber, he found it empty save for the queen herself, seated upon a throne carved from the same black crystal that formed the labyrinth. Her presence was overwhelming, her eyes gleaming with galaxies that seemed to pulse with anticipation. Between them lay a pool of liquid shadow, its surface rippling as though stirred by an unseen breeze. "Look into the pool," she commanded, her tone devoid of mockery or malice. "See the truth of what you seek." Hesitant but determined, Elias approached the edge of the pool and gazed into its depths. At first, he saw only darkness, but gradually, images began to form. He saw the world above, teetering on the brink of annihilation. Cities crumbled, forests burned, and rivers ran dry. But then, the vision shifted. He saw a glimmer of hope, a fragile thread of light that wove through the devastation. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but it grew stronger with each passing moment. And at the center of it all, he saw himself, not as a hero or a savior, but as a catalyst. A bridge between two worlds. The queen rose from her throne, her movements fluid and deliberate. "You see now," she said, her voice softer than before. "Balance is not achieved through force or sacrifice alone. It requires understanding, acceptance, and unity. Your world and mine are bound together, intertwined like roots and soil. To heal one, you must embrace the other." Elias turned to face her, his resolve hardened by the revelations. "What must I do?" The queen extended her hand once more, her touch cool against his skin. "You must become the vessel of balance. Merge the essence of your realm with mine, forging a connection that transcends the barriers we have built. But know this, such an act will change you forever. You will no longer belong wholly to either world. Are you prepared to bear that burden?" Elias hesitated, the enormity of the task settling over him like a mantle. Yet, as he looked into the queen's eyes, he saw not just power, but vulnerability. She too carried the weight of countless lifetimes, bound by duty and longing. In that moment, he understood that their fates were intertwined, their struggles reflections of the same eternal conflict. "I am ready," he said, his voice unwavering. The queen nodded, her expression inscrutable but tinged with something akin to gratitude. "Then let us begin." She guided him to the center of the chamber, where the pool of shadow swirled faster, drawing energy from the very fabric of the abyss. Together, they knelt beside it, their hands joined as the liquid began to rise, enveloping them in a cocoon of darkness. Elias felt the boundaries between his body and the abyss dissolve, his consciousness expanding to encompass both realms. Pain and ecstasy coursed through him simultaneously, a symphony of sensations that defied comprehension. Through it all, the queen remained a steady presence, her voice a beacon in the storm. "Do not fear the transformation," she murmured. "Embrace it. Become the bridge." Time lost meaning as Elias surrendered to the process, his identity merging with the essence of the abyss. When the darkness finally receded, he found himself standing in a world transformed. The sky above shimmered with stars unlike any he had ever seen, their light mingling with the glow of the earth below. The air was alive with a harmony that resonated in his very soul. The queen stood beside him, her form altered yet familiar. She no longer radiated the oppressive majesty of before. Instead, she exuded a quiet strength, her presence balanced between awe and warmth. "It is done," she said, her voice carrying a note of finality. "You have become the guardian of this fragile equilibrium. Protect it, Elias, for it is both your creation and your legacy." As the dawn broke over the horizon, casting its golden light across the newly forged world, Elias felt a profound sense of peace. He had faced the Queen of the Abyss, confronted the darkest corners of his own soul, and emerged not as a conqueror, but as a harbinger of unity. The journey had changed him irrevocably, but he knew that the path ahead would be worth every step. Together, human and queen stood side by side, guardians of a world reborn, their bond a testament to the power of understanding and sacrifice. And though challenges undoubtedly lay ahead, Elias faced them with unwavering resolve, knowing that he was no longer alone.